Welcome to the latest instalment today of the Fraud for Thought campaign as part of our Insurance in Context series. And today we'll be discussing some of the complex and collusive frauds that are occurring in the industry with particular focus on some of the agent and broker lenses that we see in the market. And I'm delighted to be welcomed today by Michelle Rafeld, seasoned pro in the industry, leading industry roles across various different organisations, and who's recently been announced as the Executive Director for the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud. So hi Michelle, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Alex, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
No problem at all. It's great to have you. And just, I guess, talking a bit about your background, really, to start with. You spent, a number of years in the industry in a few different roles. Maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about your broad experience.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's funny, I have a very diverse background in the industry. When I was going through school, I aspired to either be in the FBI or take companies public on the New York Stock Exchange. So I actually fell into the insurance industry. I never was intending to go into it, but I'm glad I did. It turned into an amazing career and is continuing to be just that. I actually entered the industry as an insurance agent. At the time I graduated from college, our stock market had crashed here in the US, and so I wasn't able to get a job with a stock brokerage. And the FBI required a year or more of training out in the business world, so I wasn't able to apply for them at that point in time. And so at the advice of a colleague and mentor, I went with an insurance company because I was able to get my insurance license as well as my securities license by being an agent. So it was a great introduction to the insurance industry. I learned about all the different laws and rules, the different products. I specialized in the sale of life and health products as well as mutual funds, and just really enjoyed getting to know that end of the industry. Unfortunately for me, it was not a career path I envisioned myself being in long term. And so I entered an application for a job that was being advertised with an insurance company to handle claims. The company had 100,000 claim backlog. And so when I interviewed for that position, they brought me on, and here it was with the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation, which here in my state is the sole provider of workers' compensation to all employers doing business here. So it's at the time I was there, it was $1 billion insurance company run by the state, and it's an amazing organization with respect to that. While I was in claims there, I got a great knowledge of how the claims process was handled. I then promoted into an audit position where I would audit self-insured companies throughout Ohio to make sure that they were complying with our laws and rules. And that position actually then led me to a position with the Special Investigations Division of the organization. They were looking to expand into employer fraud, and so they reached out to see if I would be interested. And I'm so fortunate that that whole opportunity came about because it led me to where I am today. So in joining their Special Investigations Division, I not only investigated employer fraud, but I was exposed to claimant fraud and healthcare fraud. And we would do undercover investigations, go out on interviews. We were basically, a full service investigative division. We'd partner with different law enforcement agencies should we need to do search warrants. So it was really a great experience in learning the investigative techniques that are used to identify and investigate insurance fraud. From there, I became a supervisor within the organization. And then after about 5 years, and I decided I wanted to expand my knowledge base beyond the workers' comp world. So I applied for a position with the Ohio Department of Insurance, where I then joined their fraud and enforcement division. I served in 2 different capacities as a supervisor and chief of the division over about a 2-year period, and then was made the assistant director of the division and oversaw licensing as well. And I held that role for approximately 17 years till I left the agency just this past June. So it's been a fascinating career. I'm so happy I answered that ad in the paper. I never imagined it would, lead to a 30-year, career with state government, but it led me to being introduced to organizations, such as the Coalition Against Insurance Fraud, NICB, and other, law enforcement organizations, all the other regulatory organizations out there. So it's been a fantastic experience.
Wow, yeah, fantastic wealth of experience that you've got, and really interesting your journey, I guess, from the agent side and claim side, but also into the SIU side a little later in your career. So given that probably gave you some different sights of trends and risks that were occurring in the industry. So what have you seen as that evolution over time, and what are you seeing now as some of those threats, with some particular focus in your areas of expertise in either agent or workers' comp and other areas?
Okay, yeah, I'd be happy to. And I have to say, since I started in investigations, boy, has the investigations world changed. I remember using maps and looking in phone books for information. Nothing was automated at that time. And so, really things have come full circle for the insurance industry with technology coming about. Right now, and with that being said, I think the biggest thing that the industry is having to deal with, and what we were seeing with, was the use of fraudulent documentation, whether it was through, artificial intelligence being used, or the different services to provide create fraudulent documents or fraudulent pictures, videos, images. So I see the technology piece of it all being one of the greatest threats to the industry right now, especially with respect to your more complex fraud schemes out there. Before we were dealing with the individual who was the consumer with the insurance company. Now we're dealing with individuals from all over the world who, through the use of technology and the laptops and the web, are able to try to hack in or utilize, different technology out there to hide who they are, to file, for fraudulent insurance coverage, and then file fraudulent claims against it. We're also being challenged somewhat with technology. It's moving at the speed of light. And so it's really becoming more challenging for not only insurers, but regulators and law enforcement to investigate fraud, because the paper trail that used to exist long ago is not there any longer. And it's far more technical information that's got to be obtained as part of these fraud schemes to identify who's committing the fraud, how they're committing the fraud, and how we can go about prosecuting and improving that in a court of law. So it's really been an interesting environment over the years to see it evolve. And so, I highly believe that it's imperative for insurance companies right now, as well as, the regulatory and law enforcement agencies, to invest in technology and training and all sorts of other services that will really enhance whether it's their detection abilities or their investigation abilities. Because really, it's gone to a whole nother level than when I first started, years ago.
Yeah, and I guess it's a sad reality that with the evolution of technology and that customer digital process, as you mentioned, we've seen that that's being exploited by, some of the fraudsters at the end of it, right? So given that digital access has increased, access to tech on the fraud side has increased, and also some levels of collusion have increased. What have you seen in terms of the role of potentially the likes of agents with claimants and the likes of that highly privileged position playing a part of that fraud landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have to say, I really didn't see in my past world as a regulator a lot of collusion amongst the agent and the consumer. Or even agents and outside suppliers. Occasionally we get an allegation of maybe an agent, a body shop, who colluded to file false claims against the agent's customer policies. But really what we saw what I saw in my world were seasoned agents training new agents who are coming on board as to how to commit different fraud schemes that would either benefit the insurance agent or the agency they were working for in terms of commission payments. So we called those advanced commission schemes. And it's important for me, though, to point out, and I always say this, there are, millions of insurance agents out in the world today. The agents we were dealing with made up a very small percentage of that overall population. So I do want to put out there that, most agents who are out there are extremely reputable. They're not out to defraud the carriers or consumers they're working with. But again, it was just a lot of seasoned agents training new agents coming on board their organizations on some of these schemes that they had come up with. So, I would say primarily what we saw were advanced commission schemes in the marketplace, and then also schemes to have consumers buy policies or other types of insurance products that they really didn't want or need, and that was done through deceptive sales practices. So.
Yeah, really interesting, Michelle. And like you mentioned, sadly, a small proportion of bad actors can really affect a big proportion of good people out there, both on the agent side and the customer side. I'm interested in where you saw the dynamics changing across line of business. You mentioned you have some exposure into workers' comp, into medical, into healthcare. What sort of practices were you seeing across the different lines of business?
That's a good question, Alex. With the life insurance side of things, I would say the number one thing we saw was the advanced commission schemes with agents. We would have agents identify carriers who may not do background checks on the customers or do any type of check as to whether a person was, truly a legitimate person or not. And so they would submit fraudulent applications to the carrier using completely made up information just to generate a commission on the policy. A lot of times they would take out bank accounts or use money orders to pay the funds, or a prepaid credit card that couldn't be traced back to establish the policy. And then once the commissions were paid, they would let that policy lapse and then take off, with the money. No longer do business with that carrier, and then go on and get an appointment with a new carrier and do the same thing. We also saw, in terms of that same scheme, a lot of agents committing identity theft. I don't think when they did it, they realized the true magnitude of what they were doing until later when they were prosecuted for it. In that scenario, what we saw were agents were, as part of the advanced commission schemes, would take the personal identifying information of their customers and then use that to take out new life insurance policies with new carriers without their knowledge or permission. And again, use the bogus payment system that they had set up, and usually PO boxes that they had set up so they could intercept the mail and get those new policies through and get the advanced commission. We also saw quite a few allegations of misappropriation in the marketplace, and this was usually with regard to annuity products and life insurance products that had a cash value. And so what we would have agents do in those situations is they would either steal the premium payments that consumers turned in to them directly rather than to the insurance carrier, or we'd have agents submit either fraudulent policy loan or fraudulent surrender documents to the insurance carriers that had forged signatures and bogus information on them, basically to drain the consumer's account, and they'd pocket the funds. So those were always sad situations, and some of the investigations that were our highest priority just due to the consumer harm there. We also regularly received allegations where agents would use fraudulent or deceptive practices to trick consumers into buying an annuity or a life insurance policy. A A lot of times we would have agents say that we had one agent who called a consumer and said she was with the Ohio Department of Insurance and that it was necessary for her to change her coverage. Or we'd have other agents who would cold call consumers or show up at their house and say, hi, I'm with your bank. We hold your mortgage. You're required to take out insurance so that if something happens to you and you die, that the amount can be paid off. So those were some of the things on the life and annuity side of things. And then we also saw had a lot of allegations coming in, especially during open enrollment periods for Medicare and health insurance. And so in those situations, we would have agents also using some deceptive practices, maybe not identifying accurately who they were with, or trying to trick consumers into changing into a policy that really they didn't need to change into, but it would just result in a new commission payment for the agent. The biggest thing in the Medicare arena were agents claiming to be from CMS, or the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services here in the US. So, here these poor seniors would think, oh my gosh, the government's calling me, I have to switch. And then they'd be put into a policy or product where, their doctors weren't even in network, their drugs weren't weren't going to be covered at a rate that they needed them to be covered. And so it really left them in a financial hardship. And then the last trend that we started to see on the home and auto side of things, just prior to my leaving the department, we were seeing agents actually manipulating the insurance carrier systems and specifically for pricing, so that their customers would receive a lower rate on their insurance. And so this would usually involve the agent maybe claiming a customer qualified for a discount when in reality they didn't meet the terms and conditions for that discount. We saw people saying, agents saying that someone was taking out both home and auto to get that reduced package rate, and then they would cancel the other, but just to get it to set up. So that was something that was really becoming more prevalent, and was an issue that we really had to start taking action on with the agents towards my last bit of time in state government. So.
Oh, it's really interesting, I guess, to have heard those different tactics that are used across different lines of business. And the sad reality, as you mentioned, is that these frauds are impacting, honest customers at the end of it. Often it's their purse that's being hit, and they're highly sensitive in nature, right, due to the
Yes.
nature of conflict of interest and sphere of influence involved with the agent. So given that, and given the impact on customer, often consumer data and consumer privacy comes into this type of agenda. How do you make sure you're using data in the right way to protect the consumer, but also to detect those frauds that are impacting the consumer at the end of it? So given that dynamic between consumer regulations and data privacy and the need to fight fraud, sort of how do you see organizations and the industry looking to sort of bridge the gap between those two worlds?
As you know, there have been a lot of models put in place to provide consumer protection with regard to the use of AI and data in the marketplace. And a lot of those models really reiterate a lot of regulations that are already in place. So I think if the insurance industry really takes a look at those models and asks questions of any of the vendors they may be using as to how the data is going to be used, what data is going to be used, to be sure that they are using it properly and not in violation with state laws, I think it's going to be a huge and incredible resource to the industry in the detection and investigation of fraud. The industry, really needs to come up to speed on all of the new regulations that are coming out there. I also think, it's important that they have conversations with the regulators about the use, so that as these laws move forward on a state-by-state basis, that there is a carve-out for fraud. A study done by the coalition shows that consumers want insurance carriers to be able to use their data to, detect and investigate fraud. They realize that it can help overall, with the insurance premiums being kept low, because insurance carriers then can mitigate loss. So it's important that there be those conversations with the regulators, with the legislature, on how data is being used. There needs to be transparency on how it's being used. And I really think companies need to, before they implement any type of system to assist them in this new world we're in, that they ask those important questions, especially if they're contracting out with outside firms, about what data is being used, so they can ensure that it's in compliance and that they'll be in compliance with state insurance laws and won't run into a regulatory problem in the future. One of the presentations that the coalition did was on a study that was done with consumers last year. They specifically asked in the studies, is it okay to use certain data for fraud detection? And consumers were really actually in favor of that. And so again, I think as long as the companies are doing the data collection, the data mining, and then the data analysis, and making sure that only data that is allowed to be used in accordance with the state insurance laws.
Yeah, and a lot of that you touched on, it comes back to some of your experience around the public sector and government and regulatory authorities, state authorities working in collaboration with the private insurance sector and the private insurance companies. And so your roles that you've had have sort of bridged that gap in a number of ways. Clearly that relationship and that collaboration is key. Sort of what do you see potentially happening in the future with regards to those types of relationships, and do you see things changing? Do you see things evolving in that space?
I do. I'm hoping that there's even more collaboration. This is getting more and more difficult to handle. Technology is changing so fast and so furiously that you need those partnerships with the insurance carriers, the regulators, the vendors of all these products, and even the technology experts who can keep us apprised of how these things have changed from one reiteration to another. And I'll give you a good example, because when you do have that partnership, amazing things can happen. And I'll give you an example of one such private-public partnership that actually exists here in the US, and that's through our Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services. They started the Healthcare Fraud Prevention Partnership, which is a public-private partnership with the federal government and the insurance carriers all across the country. All insurance carriers provide their data to the public partnership, and then that partnership, the HFPP, goes ahead, manipulates that data, and sends out alerts about potential fraud schemes that have been identified. In addition to that, they partner together to do white papers and alerts about new trends in the marketplace. And so on the healthcare side of things, it's been extremely effective because, while one or two carriers may have thought that they were being impacted by putting the information into this master database run by our government, they're identifying more and more victims out there in terms of the insurance carriers, and are able to share that data with them so that the appropriate action, can be taken with regard to those providers. So that's just an example of one. We've got another on the auto side of things here. That's through the National Insurance Crime Bureau. They collect data regarding auto claims filed and homeowners claim filed. And that system is a wealth of information for not only the insurance industry, but law enforcement and regulatory organizations. It's a great detection tool, and it allows us then to come together and address situations where we have identified specific individuals out to defraud the industry. And so, I've always believed collaboration is key. And so the more that we can share information relating to, data and trends and what to look for, I think the better off we'll all be, especially in trying to stay up to speed, with all of the new fraud schemes that are developing, due to the use of technology.
You mentioned there that the landscape of technology is evolving quickly. The use of data and data sharing is evolving quickly. Sort of what do you see, therefore, the future looking like in this space, and what initiatives or opportunities do you see for the market to help, defend the bad actors and protect the honest customer at the end of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The integration of data and technology, it's been amazing to watch, and it's really resulted in some exciting changes in the way insurance fraud is identified and investigated. And I've seen it really, in the last decade. It's been a great way for carriers to become more proactive in their fraud detection efforts. I think also with technology, insurance carriers have the opportunity, if they haven't done so already, to enhance their fraud detection efforts with regards to claims that are coming into their organization. A lot of these systems have scoring systems associated with them, and that allows the carrier to ask questions and do further investigation into a potential fraudulent claim before any payments have been issued. And that eliminates that pay and chase afterwards. Now, I do think it's also important for carriers to realize that all of this technology may be used against them. We are now dealing with sophisticated criminals who are looking to exploit carrier vulnerabilities. And so, they really got to work with their IT departments on, cybersecurity attacks, which are now an everyday thing, because, that too is a huge risk that needs to be mitigated so that the insurance carrier themselves, as well as their customers, don't find themselves the victims of fraud.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights today, Michelle. It'd be obviously remiss of me to not give you huge congratulations on your recent announcement of becoming the new executive director for the coalition. I'd be really interested, just to close this off, on sort of what plans do you have for 2024? What does that look like for you in your new role, and how do some of these trends that we've talked about potentially impact that?
Great. Thank you for that. And I have to say, I'm very honored to have been chosen to lead such an amazing organization, let alone one that really has had a profound impact on me, professionally and personally. So I'm extremely excited for 2024. For the last 30 years, the coalition really has been a trailblazer in uniting diverse groups, both domestically and internationally, in the fight against fraud. So I am really looking forward to having an opportunity to build on what Dennis Jay, who is the coalition's founder, and Matthew Smith, our outgoing executive director, who's done amazing things over the last 4 years. I'm looking forward to building on what they've accomplished to this point. Because I've always thought collaboration is necessary for effectively fighting insurance fraud, I'm really looking forward to creating and implementing new member impacting initiatives that center around significant issues in the marketplace. Some of those involve, contractor fraud, agent fraud, which we talked about, and just a general awareness of insurance fraud and the changing, attitudes towards it. It's something we really need to address now. We've seen, the demographic out there. We've seen changes in the various demographics on how they view fraud. In our younger population, it's scary to think, but they don't see it as being an issue, and they're more inclined to commit it. So the time is now for us to act, and that's going to be a major project for me to develop initiatives around that specific issue, especially. I'll be looking to foster, a greater sense of partnership and opportunities where we can collaborate within the coalition. And I really think overall that's going to help us make a greater impact in the fight against fraud and continue our upward trajectory, you know, in bringing awareness to the importance of this topic in general.
Fantastic and exciting for the industry for sure, and exciting for, you know, ourselves in partnership with you, and want to thank the coalition for the support that you continue to give the industry. So that concludes our session. Thank you so much for your time today and your insight, Michelle. I wish you a lovely Christmas and happy holidays, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Looking forward to working with you in 2024.